Before the world knew her name, she wasn't supposed to make it this far. A daughter of immigrants, a woman of color, in a system built to keep her out. But somehow, Kamala Harris didn't just break the rules. She rewrote the story. Before she stood on the biggest political stage in American history, Kamala Harris was just a little girl in Oakland. She was born on October 20th, 1964, into a world that didn't always welcome girls like her, girls with brown skin, tight curls, and a spark in their eyes. Her mother, Shyamala Gopalan, had left everything behind in India. Her family, her comfort, her culture. Why? To chase knowledge, to study cancer research. She didn't just come to America for a degree, she came to make a difference. Kamala's father, Donald Harris, came from Jamaica, driven by a hunger to understand economics and systems of power. Two immigrants. Two dreamers. Two people who believed that justice wasn't a privilege, it was a right. Kamala was born into that energy. Into protest signs, marches, change. Into love, but also into struggle. At age 7, the safe little world she knew cracked open. Her parents divorced. Her mother, still adjusting to a new country, was now a single mom. With 2 little girls. A demanding job. And rent that always came too soon. They moved into a small apartment in Berkeley. No luxury. No ease. Just survival. There were nights Kamala could hear her mom crying quietly in the kitchen. She didn't ask why. She already knew. But she also saw her mom wake up the next morning, put on her lab coat, and go change the world again. Kamala once said, "My mother was the most powerful person I knew. Not because she yelled, but because she never gave up." That stayed with her. After school, Kamala would walk home with her sister Maya, hand in hand, passing street murals, jazz players, and corner preachers. Her city raised her. She grew up surrounded by Black pride and South Asian grace, by struggle and by strength. Some days, she felt too Indian. Some days, too Black. Some days, invisible. She didn't quite fit into a box, and maybe that was the point. When Kamala entered Berkeley's desegregation program, she was bused to a school far from home, into a mostly white neighborhood. She was just a little girl with a backpack. But she could feel the stares. The subtle cold shoulders. The questions in people's eyes. "Do you belong here?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She kept showing up. That little girl with brown skin and big dreams was quietly building armor. Her mother kept reminding her, "Kamala, don't you ever let someone make you feel small. Your voice matters." Those weren't just words. They were oxygen. Kamala saw injustice early. She saw her mom get ignored at conferences. Watched her brilliance be dismissed by men with lesser minds. Watched her smile through it and keep going. That lit a fire in Kamala's heart. Not a fire to fight back with fists, but with facts, with law, with powerful silence, and even more powerful action. Even as a child, Kamala felt that calling. To defend. To protect. To speak for the ones who were never heard. She didn't grow up thinking she'd be famous. She grew up thinking she'd make things fair. On weekends, she marched with her mom. Tiny hands holding protest signs too big for her arms. Chanting with a crowd of strangers who all believed in the same thing. Justice for all. She didn't fully understand what they were fighting for. But she knew, in her bones, that it mattered. At night, she and Maya would lay in bed, giggling, talking, dreaming. They didn't talk about politics. They talked about helping people. Kamala wasn't raised to chase power. She was raised to use it, wisely, kindly, and fearlessly. Her mother's favorite line? "You may be the first to do many things, just make sure you're not the last." Kamala would carry that with her forever. It wasn't always easy. She was teased, misunderstood, doubted. But there was a strength in her silence, in her quiet defiance, in her decision to keep rising, no matter what. Every late-night bus ride, every teacher who underestimated her, every time she felt out of place, all of it was shaping her, turning her pain into power. From that tiny apartment in Berkeley, from a life built on love, loss, and lessons, a little girl with brown skin and burning purpose began her journey. Not to fame, but to history. As Kamala grew older, so did the fire inside her. She wasn't content to just watch the world go by. She wanted to understand it, question it, challenge it, and maybe change it. High school came fast, and so did new pressures. Like many children of immigrants, Kamala felt the invisible weight of expectation. Be excellent. Be tough. Be grateful. And never forget where you came from. She didn't have the privilege of coasting. She had to earn every inch. Her path led her across the country to Howard University in Washington, D.C., a place that would forever shape her soul. Howard wasn't just a school. It was a beacon, a historically Black university known for producing leaders, scholars, revolutionaries. For the first time in her life, Kamala was surrounded by people who looked like her, spoke like her, and dreamed just as boldly. She was no longer the girl on the outside. Here, she felt seen. She joined Alpha Kappa Alpha, the first Black sorority in the country. She marched in protests, debated in classrooms. She walked across the quad with confidence, wearing jeans and ambition. This wasn't just college. This was her awakening. In interviews, Kamala often said that Howard gave her the tools to find her voice and to sharpen it. It taught her that being Black and brilliant weren't opposites. They were power, doubled. But still, she held two cultures in her heart, the bold resistance of Black America and the quiet wisdom of her Indian roots. It wasn't always easy to balance. Sometimes, she was told she wasn't Black enough. Other times, she was questioned for claiming her South Asian heritage. Kamala never chose sides. She chose truth. She was both. And proudly so. After Howard, she went on to earn her law degree from the University of California, Hastings College of the Law. But even there, the fight wasn't over. She was often one of the few women of color in the room. Sometimes, the only one. People mispronounced her name, dismissed her ideas, underestimated her strength. And every time they did, she grew stronger. She didn't yell. She listened. She studied. And then she struck, not with anger, but with intelligence. Kamala chose criminal justice as her path. A controversial choice, even among her peers. Why become a prosecutor in a system that had historically hurt people who looked like her? Because, as she would later say, you can either complain about the system, or you can try to be part of the change. She didn't want to throw stones from the outside. She wanted to build better from within. Her early years as a deputy district attorney in Alameda County weren't glamorous. Long hours, Harsh cases. Trauma. Frustration. She saw lives torn apart by violence. She saw victims too scared to speak. She saw young black men trapped in cycles of poverty, crime, and neglect. And she had to ask herself hard questions every day. Was she helping? Or was she becoming part of the very machine she had vowed to fix? But Kamala believed in nuance. She believed that justice wasn't about punishment, it was about restoration, protection, and balance. She fought for children. For victims of abuse. For second chances. She walked into courtrooms not to win, but to do what was right. Her reputation began to grow. Not because she played the game, but because she refused to play it the usual way. She spoke with conviction. She listened more than she talked. She stood firm even when she stood alone. And slowly, people started to notice. She wasn't just another attorney. She was a force. A woman who had taken every piece of pain from her past and turned it into a compass, one that always pointed toward justice. Even her critics had to admit. She was relentless. Focused. Unshakable. But beneath that sharp suit and steely gaze was still that same little girl from Berkeley. The one holding a protest sign too big for her arms. The one who watched her mother fight battles without ever raising her voice. Kamala hadn't changed. She had simply grown into herself. By her early 30s, Kamala Harris wasn't just practicing law. She was living her purpose. She believed the justice system didn't have to be a cold machine. It could be human. It could have heart. And if she had anything to say about it, it would. Kamala Harris didn't chase power. She chased purpose. And in 2003, when she ran for district attorney of San Francisco, many didn't believe she could win. She was a Black and South Asian woman, challenging an established incumbent in a field dominated by white men. People whispered behind closed doors. She's too ambitious. She's too young. She's not tough enough. But Kamala had heard it all before. And this time, she wasn't listening. She hit the streets. Knocked on doors. Looked voters in the eyes and told them exactly who she was and what she stood for. She wasn't promising perfection. She was promising something far more powerful, change. She believed that safety and fairness didn't have to be enemies. That communities could be protected without being policed like war zones. And when the results came in, she won. She made history as the first woman, the first Black person, and the first South Asian to be elected DA of San Francisco. She didn't walk into the DA's office with fanfare. She walked in with intent. The walls were lined with past prosecutors, all of them white men. Kamala looked around, and then she looked in the mirror, a reflection of so many who had never seen themselves in power before. But she wasn't interested in just making history. She wanted to reshape it. Her policies stirred debate. She was criticized for being both too progressive and not progressive enough. Some wanted her to be a warrior. Others wanted her to be silent. But Kamala wasn't here to make everyone comfortable. She was here to move things forward. She started programs to reduce recidivism, helping first-time offenders avoid prison by offering education and job training. She cracked down on crimes that truly harmed communities, while giving young people a second chance. One of her most defining moments came when she refused to seek the death penalty for a man who killed a police officer. It was an incredibly difficult, emotional case. And her decision cost her support. She was booed at a police funeral. Her own political survival was at risk. But Kamala didn't flinch. She said, "I knew I would be attacked, but I also knew I had to do what I believed was right." That moment didn't break her, it defined her. She had proved something vital. That leadership wasn't about winning popularity contests. It was about making decisions rooted in principle, not politics. And from there, her star began to rise. In 2010, she ran for California Attorney General, the top law enforcement position in the state. Once again, the odds were against her. She was up against better-funded opponents with stronger political connections. Some headlines even labeled her campaign symbolic. But Kamala believed in the power of the people. She built a grassroots campaign, traveled across the state, and spoke directly to Californians about justice, reform, and dignity. It was a tight race, one of the closest in California history. But in the end, she won. And again, she made history. The first woman, the first Black American, and the first South Asian American elected Attorney General of California. With her new role came new battles. Kamala stood up to powerful industries. She took on big banks in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, securing billions of dollars in relief for homeowners. She pushed for criminal justice reform while also ensuring public safety. She created Open Justice, a data transparency initiative to make law enforcement more accountable. But behind all the policy and headlines, Kamala never forgot where she came from. She still carried the lessons of her mother, to speak truth, to fight with compassion, and to never let others define your worth. She was constantly navigating impossible spaces. Too tough for some. Too soft for others. Too ambitious. Too opinionated. Too everything. But Kamala had learned long ago. You don't have to shrink to make others comfortable. She kept rising. Kept showing up. And she inspired millions along the way, especially young girls of color, who could now see someone in power who looked like them, talked like them, fought for them. In speeches, Kamala would remind them, "You may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last." She knew her journey wasn't hers alone. It was a path cleared by ancestors and activists. And she was determined to leave it wider, safer, and more visible for those who came next. By the mid-2010s, Kamala Harris was no longer just a rising star. She was a national figure, a symbol of what resilience, intelligence, and integrity could build. And she was far from finished. Kamala Harris wasn't seeking the spotlight, but it found her. By the time 2016 arrived, her name was being whispered in political circles far beyond California. People saw her not just as a capable leader, but as someone who might shape the future of American politics. And when Senator Barbara Boxer announced her retirement, Kamala made a bold decision: she would run for the United States Senate. It wasn't an easy choice. The Senate was another arena where women of color were almost non-existent. In its entire history, only 2 Black women had ever served in that chamber. And none had been of South Asian descent. Kamala knew what was at stake. She remembered walking into courtrooms as a young prosecutor and being the only woman of color in the room. She remembered how often people doubted her, how they'd assume she was someone's assistant, or a translator. Now, she was preparing to walk into one of the most powerful political arenas in the world. But Kamala didn't flinch. She ran with conviction. Her campaign centered on values that never changed: justice, equality, compassion, and truth. She spoke about criminal justice reform, immigration, healthcare, and the struggles working families face every day. And people listened. They didn't just see her as a politician, they saw her as a person who understood their pain, their fears, and their dreams. Someone who had faced struggle and kept rising. In November 2016, Kamala Harris was elected to the U.S. Senate, becoming the first Black woman from California, and the first South Asian American ever elected to the Senate. She stepped into Capitol Hill ready to make her voice heard, not just for herself, but for millions who had been voiceless for generations. Her Senate hearings became viral moments. She was sharp. She was unflinching. She was prepared. Whether questioning Supreme Court nominees or top officials, Kamala made it clear she wasn't there to play political games. She was there to speak truth. But with greater visibility came louder criticism. Her identity was often used against her. Some accused her of being too aggressive. Others questioned her authenticity. They twisted her ambition into arrogance. Kamala kept going. And then, in 2019, she made another bold move. She announced her candidacy for President of the United States. It was historic, a woman of Black and South Asian heritage running to lead the most powerful nation on earth. Her campaign launch drew over 20,000 people in her hometown of Oakland, California. There were cheers, tears, hope. History unfolding in real time. She spoke of her mother, how she taught her to fight with purpose. She spoke of her career, how she took on big banks, stood for working families, and refused to back down from hard truths. But running for president is a grueling journey. Every move was dissected. Every policy questioned. Every misstep magnified. Despite strong performances in debates and growing national support, her campaign began to falter. In December 2019, she made the difficult decision to suspend her campaign. Many thought that was the end of Kamala Harris's journey toward the White House. But fate had other plans. In 2020, former Vice President Joe Biden, now the Democratic nominee, was searching for a running mate. He needed someone experienced. Someone bold. Someone who could speak to the soul of the nation and help heal it. He chose Kamala Harris. And once again, she made history. On August 11, 2020, she became the first Black woman, the first South Asian woman, and the first HBCU graduate ever nominated for vice president by a major party. The nation watched as she debated, campaigned, and stood strong, representing not just a political movement, but a cultural shift. On November 7, 2020, the results came in. Kamala Harris had become the vice president-elect of the United States. The moment was electric. Crowds danced in the streets. Young girls, especially girls of color, stared at their screens with wide eyes, realizing that they belonged at the highest levels too. In her victory speech, Kamala wore white, honoring the suffragettes who fought for women's right to vote. Her voice cracked with emotion as she said, "While I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last." It wasn't just a promise. It was a declaration of change. Her journey to the White House wasn't paved with privilege. It was carved through pain, prejudice, and persistence. Through quiet resilience and loud courage. Kamala Harris had climbed to the second highest office in the land, not by fitting into the mold, but by breaking it. And she stood there, not just as a leader, but as a symbol of what's possible when someone refuses to be defined by others. Kamala Harris didn't just break barriers, she shattered centuries-old walls. When she took the oath as Vice President of the United States on January 20, 2021, the world watched history unfold. There she stood, hand on Thurgood Marshall's Bible, dressed in royal purple, the color of unity, with a smile that held the weight of generations. Behind her were two immigrant parents, a childhood shaped by activism, and decades of battles against systems not designed for people like her. In that moment, Kamala wasn't just becoming the first woman, the first Black person, and the first South Asian American to hold the office. She was becoming a symbol of what's possible. For millions watching, especially young girls, children of immigrants, and people of color, it wasn't just a political milestone. It was personal. They saw themselves in her. Her curly hair. Her skin tone. Her story. They saw that the highest levels of power no longer belonged only to the few, they belonged to all of us. But Kamala knew that symbolism wasn't enough. Once in office, she got to work. She became a key figure in navigating crisis after crisis, from the COVID-19 pandemic to immigration reform, voting rights battles, reproductive rights, and foreign diplomacy. She stood beside President Biden, not as a silent second, but as an active leader, unafraid to take the mic and speak the truth. Behind closed doors, she led critical discussions. On the world stage, she represented America with strength and empathy. In communities across the country, she listened, truly listened, to the pain and hopes of everyday people. But with visibility came pressure. Every misstep made headlines. Every word was scrutinized. The same ambition that once lifted her was now weaponized by critics. Still, Kamala didn't let it change her. She leaned into her roots, into her mother's lessons, her Bay Area upbringing, her faith in justice. And most of all, she leaned into the power of representation. She began holding roundtables with women entrepreneurs, visiting small businesses run by immigrants, and standing with families in crisis. She made it a point to lift voices too often ignored, not just during election season, but every single day. Because Kamala Harris believed that leadership wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present. And for the young girl watching her on TV in a tiny apartment. For the college student facing racism in a lecture hall. For the working mother who wonders if her voice matters. Kamala's presence alone whispered, "Yes, you belong. Yes, you can." Her legacy wasn't built on one title. It was built on 10,000 quiet decisions to show up, speak up, and never back down even when the odds were crushing. And what's more powerful is that her story is still being written. Some say she could one day become president. Others believe her impact has already rippled further than any title can contain. Because Kamala didn't just inspire people to dream bigger, she changed the definition of what a leader can look like. In classrooms, children now draw presidents and vice presidents with brown skin and curly hair. In family kitchens, immigrant parents tell their daughters, "If Kamala can do it, so can you." Her influence stretches beyond borders, to women running for office in India, Africa, and the Caribbean. To activists organizing in small towns. To voters who once felt invisible. She is proof that heritage is not a limitation, it's a superpower. That empathy and strength can live in the same heart. That you can walk into a room as the only one, and still change everything. Kamala Harris's rise to the White House is not just a chapter in history books, it's a mirror reflecting a new kind of America. One that is bold. One that is diverse. One that believes the future belongs to everyone. So when Kamala says, "I may be the first, but I won't be the last," she isn't just predicting what's next, she's building it. And somewhere out there, another young girl, maybe born to immigrant parents, maybe from a neighborhood no one talks about, is watching her. Not just seeing a vice president, but seeing herself. Kamala Harris isn't just a vice president. She's proof that dreams don't ask for permission. That your store.
It's Visionary Steps 09. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Subscribe us for such as interesting videos. Thank you so much.